yeah, I could kick the crap out of your numbers for a quarter or for a year, but what does that help you if it destroys your organization?
Well, good afternoon. We're doing another Bad Bosses podcast this afternoon. First of all, I'd like to give a shout out to all the brothers and sisters in blue as the Bad Bosses supports the blue and all first responders, as well as all of those serving in the military, both current, past, veterans as well. And today we'd like to welcome Mark O'Donnell. We're going to be talking about a little different perspective from Bad Bosses, Operation Excellence. I got that right, Mark? And we're going to talk a little bit about, how Mark got into this, what led to that, and then we'll go from there. So with that being said, Mark, you have the floor. Welcome, Mark O'Donnell.
Well, thank you.
Got your beautiful Bad Bosses hat you can wear on the golf
beautiful.
course.
We got swag. I love it.
Yeah, we got swag.
Gotta love swag.
We got swag.
Beautiful. Well, Joe, thanks. I appreciate you having me on, and it's kind of funny because we reconnected and started. You were telling Danny before we started the episode here today. You were telling him about how we sat down and got talking. Within a few minutes, we realized, oh my God, yeah, we knew each other back in the day. Went to the same high school. You were
35 years ago.
A year behind me, but we knew a lot of the same people and actually hung out with some of the same people, and we survived.
Yeah.
So thank God for that, right? Thank God, as we both said, that social media didn't exist back then.
Absolutely.
Because there would have been too much of a record of that stuff. So
Definitely.
so thanks again for having me on. It's really good to see you again. Really like what you're doing.
Thank you.
I have had a chance to go ahead and look at some of your episodes, and good stuff, man. Good stuff. So Operations Excellence. People that are watching your podcast may not know I started my career as an engineer, undergraduate degree from our alma mater, Syracuse University, and went back to school in my 30s at Lemoyne College for an MBA part-time as an adult. Started my career as an industrial engineer in manufacturing. Was promoted in my early 30s, literally. And I tell this story. I just told this story this morning to a client. I went on a Friday from being an engineer. On Monday, I was the engineering manager. And
wow.
what did they do for development or training? Well, they gave me about an hour rundown on the HR policies, a handshake, and said good luck. Now that's not really development, right? What we realize is what they used to call soft skills are essential skills, and it's a whole different skill set. To be successful as a leader as opposed to being a worker or a doer, right? I was a pretty decent engineer, but I had no development really in leadership skill sets. So that's largely what I do now. I was downsized in summer of 2021 from as general manager for a local division of a company that's pretty sizable. And late 50s, but not ready to retire and still got some tread on the tire. What are you going to do? So thought about consulting and, being a good engineer. I did my homework, made some phone calls, talked to some people that I know from the corporate world that had made the transition from executive leadership to consulting for themselves. And, how'd you do it? What'd you do? Do you have any tips? All the questions like you have done the same process, basically. And some of the tips I got were outstanding, and one of the best things was focus on what you love to do that, and you'll not only be successful, you'll be happy. So I thought a lot about that and did some soul searching. And the engineer in me loves solving problems. Once they train you how to think like an engineer, you don't unlearn that.
Correct.
Right? That's just the way I think. And I think there was always been a part of me all the way back to being a kid that enjoyed solving problems, figuring it out. Okay, check that box. Well, then I thought some more about when was I happiest in the work world when I was working for somebody else, and I realized I had the opportunity multiple times to mentor and coach other people, and it was just so rewarding to see the light bulb go on, and see not only their career take a different trajectory, but their personal life just dramatically change, right? And totally different trajectory.
Let me stop you here real quick because you touched on some really significant things that I think are very helpful in that you don't see a lot in businesses today, coaching and mentoring. So, I was assigned a coach. I was assigned a mentor because I had a good leader.
Internal to your organization?
Internal to my organization, I also became a big fan of that practice. What surprises me is that you don't hear that a lot. And I think that is one thing that we would absolutely love to see, regardless of the business, especially some of the smaller companies. But you don't see that in retail. You don't see that in food service. You don't see that in a lot of industries. So speak to that a little bit. Were you coached and mentored, or was that something that you came to develop on your own as you went from being a worker to a manager?
Yeah, that's a great question. So through the course of my career, I never had a formal coach / mentor. However, I had several people that I developed those types of relationships with. I remember one individual, and I won't mention the company. He was a senior VP. I was an engineer, then an engineering manager, and moved up through the ranks, and we still know each other today. And he was a generation plus older than me, but he was kind of like that uncle that you could argue with and then still sit down and no hard feelings. Like we could go back and forth on something, totally disagree, and then he'd still buy you a cup of coffee, and there was nothing, you know what I mean? We had, and I learned a lot from him, and there were others through the course of my career.
So you had unofficial coaches and mentors.
Yeah, and I think part of it is whether I did it I'm sure at first it was not conscious. It was more just drawn to these people that had an ability, right, that I obviously recognized, and I always have had a desire to learn. I've always been inquisitive. But I think as I got out of my career, I did more consciously seek those kind of people out, and then tap into them. And certainly as our confidence grows with experience, then, it's a lot easier to say, hey, why'd you do that? Or why'd you do it that way? Or, to really pick somebody's brain. So yeah.
So when you began mentoring and coaching, how was that received? And because obviously you probably cross-generational, you probably, crossed.
Oh yeah. A lot of people that were certainly young enough to be, my kid.
Sure.
They weren't, thank God. It was not, first of all, it was, which is too bad. None of the organizations I worked in had formal mentoring programs, right? Which we can talk about that in a minute. But, I saw somebody with an incredible ceiling, right? Just incredible ability. And also what I would always, people that I would kind of take under my wing, not just the technical side, but they had some people skills, right? So right away, in my mind, I'm thinking they're a potential leader. Like they have some of those
qualities.
Yeah,
sure.
Right? And they had some strong emotional intelligence and some good communication skills, and they just needed to really have the opportunity to further develop them. So really, it was people that were type A's, right? They were driven. You could tell that they wanted more out of life, but were kind of stuck, right? And so those were kind of the people that I would reach out to, and if they wanted my help, fine. And it would be an informal kind of relationship, and I was the guy saying, hey, you're a technician now, but if you went back and got a 2-year degree, you could do this, and then that could take you here. And, I'm thinking of one individual in particular, excuse me, and man, he was terrified of going back to school. He's in his probably mid-30s at the time, hadn't been in school since he graduated high school. Long time.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
And, I don't know if I could do it. And finally, it's just like to drop water on the stone. It was, hey, man, look at what you're doing in your day-to-day job. What makes you think you couldn't, go take one class, try it out,
Start there.
give it a shot, right? And then, of course, once he opened the door, got a little confidence, he was off to the races. Yeah, he went on to become a supervisor and then a manager and moved on. He's had a great career.
Now, do you think that, we talk about people skills or soft skills or, even emotional intelligence, which is something that, I've keyed in on later on in my career. Do you think that there's a huge difference in the engineering manufacturing world from any other, besides the obvious, but when it comes down to it, you're still dealing with people.
Correct.
And if you understand that dynamic, how does that work in the engineering field? I had a brother-in-law and an uncle who were engineers, and I always, the term in the family was always they're different. Usually higher intelligence and therefore, some of the soft people skills, and I don't mean to insult any engineers.
No, you know what? I'm a degreed engineer. I started my career as
Yeah.
an engineer, and I've managed engineering groups multiple times over the course of my career, and I can tell you engineers are absolutely different cats. Like most stereotypes, there's typically some kernel of truth, and then it gets, kind of taken a little bit out of context. I can't tell you how many times I've sat in rooms, and I'm a degreed engineer, with groups of engineers, and first off, they're arguing over the most mundane topic, and they fail to see the fact that, what you're arguing about is insignificant, right? Like you guys are 90% on the same page. Let's go with that, and let's forget about the other 10%, right? But it is very much true that engineers, most, not all, are very good with each other, and if you get them with a non-technical person, they struggle to connect, right? They struggle for the non-technical person to understand what the heck they're talking about. I realized early on in my career I was one of those strange birds that could communicate technical information to non-technical people. And I also realized that there's a lot of engineers out there that within 2 minutes are beyond me, and I realize that. So, okay, where's my sweet spot? So there is some truth to it, I guess, from my experience. But I've also met a number of engineers. I'm not a unicorn.
Sure.
Right? There are others like me that are very, very good at the other side, right? At people skills, whatever you want to call it, and have developed them, right? I also have come to believe and also understand very clearly, I would say from experience, that anybody, pretty much anybody, if you have the desire and if you're willing to put the effort in, can develop those people skills, right? So, it's really what do you want, and are you willing to practice the discipline and make the effort to develop those skills?
So let's chat a little bit about bad bosses in this environment. So, I learned years ago, and I don't remember the person who told me, but, they talked about ego. And they said, if you let your ego get in the way, you go. So you can actually prevent your further development, or you could prevent further development of your team if they're coming to you with something. So I would imagine that's got to be challenging in the engineering field. But, did you experience bad bosses in the engineering world who lacked either the people skills or let their ego because of their intelligence, or because they had been so successful for so many years in development and seeing things go from development into production? And how did you work around that or manage that, or,
Sure. And to be clear, I wouldn't say I lived in the engineering world, right? I have managed organizations that had engineers in them.
Okay.
I have led engineering departments. but I've also led a lot of non-engineers as well. So let's just stick, bad bosses, whether an engineer or not, I think is irrelevant. So I'm going to throw that part out.
That's great.
Just, let's go back to what you first started with, which is ego. First, let's understand what is ego. And ego is really just our sense of self, right? So if my ego is properly sized, it's not an issue because we all have a sense of self.
Correct.
Right? Who we are, right?
Yeah.
Where I fit in the world, right? Et cetera, et cetera. The problem is when my ego is overblown, my sense of self, and that really gets to self-centeredness, and the other term that comes to mind is hubris, right? That I think I know more than I do, right? And that's always going to be a problem. So yeah, I mean, if you really want to talk about a good leader versus not a good leader, so let's go back to what I use with my clients and trying to get this idea across. How do you define a successful leader? It's really simple. You can take all the characteristics, all of that, and put it aside because the truth is, Joe, what characteristics a successful leader has is going to vary dependent on the situation and the organization they're leading, right? Because what one set of characteristics might work in this instance may be a total failure in another instance, right? So what defines a successful leader? It's very simple. They get results. Look at the results. Are they attaining the results that are expected or exceeding them? And if the answer is yes, then they're a successful leader.
Regardless of the cost.
No.
Okay.
No. I didn't say that.
Right.
Right? Because the results also go to things like attracting and retaining quality talent. Right? And you're not going to have long-term sustainable results if you can't attract and retain quality talent. Yeah, I can go out for a quarter or for 6 months or a year, maybe 2 years, and kick the crap out of your numbers, I mean, I learned a lot over the years. I worked alongside one of the best finance accounting people I've ever met. Mm-hmm. He taught me more than they did in the MBA program. I mean, I know how a balance sheet works and how a P&L. I could kick the crap out of your numbers for a quarter or for a year. But what does that help you if it destroys your organization?
Correct.
Right? I mean, if you're just in it for the short term, that's a whole different thing. So when I talk about success, it's about getting results, but part of the results are the sustainability. Right? To me, that's cooked into the discussion. Otherwise, it's not sustainable. If it's not sustainable, it's not a success. Mm-hmm. Right? So people forget or maybe don't understand that, especially people that haven't been in a leadership role, real leadership is not about being the guy or the gal that's out front and the face of the blah, 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 blah. That's window dressing. Real leadership is about being a servant, right? It's about creating the environment and the circumstances and working with your team to make them the most successful. Because as a leader, you're not successful if your team isn't.
I love that. Can you just say that again for our people who may be tuning in? Because you tuned right into it. It's really about making your people successful.
As a leader, right? I mean, how do you get the results? The people doing the work are going to get the results, right? I mean, I'm going to position them to be successful. I'm going to provide them the resources they need to be successful. I'm going to coach them to help them be successful, to help them become the best version of themselves, right? The true form of leadership is not just servant, but coach and mentor, because at the end of the day, it is helping every one of your team members to become the best version of themselves, right? So that they perform at the highest level. And oh, by the way, it also makes them the happiest, most contented human beings when they're doing that.
I'm sure you've seen it a lot on LinkedIn and other areas on the internet today. And I know, I learned this from a couple of bosses, but, good leaders make other leaders.
Yeah.
And if you do your job right, and I'm not saying everybody that's going to work for you, so we want to clarify that, but if your part of your position is to kind of identify and develop and create other leaders, then you've done a good job. Would you say that's
100%.
Would you say that's accurate?
100%, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I just said, right, you as one of the key roles of a leader is to continually be developing your team. And that might look different. I was having a conversation earlier today. I had a team member once who was an engineer, mechanical engineer, very, very bright individual, very good at what he did. Mm-hmm. And for a couple years, we tried to make him into a manager. And it was a disaster. He didn't like it. He wasn't good at it. He was a trooper. He never told us how much he disliked it until after, we'd been on this experiment for a while. And he's like, yeah, I don't really like this. Okay. So after that experience, he's in my office and we're having a one-on-one discussion. I'm like, what makes you happy? What do you want to do? I said, hey, man, if I gave you a blank piece of paper and you could draw up what you're doing a year from now, what's that look like? What makes you happy? And he said, I'm doing this mechanical stuff and I love problem solving, but I'd really like to get into the control side. Well, we did, right, the control side of the equipment we made as well. And I'm like, we don't have anybody that walks both sides of that coin. Sure. And so we gave him a chance to learn it, and he really became this one person that was able to kind of walk on both sides, which solved a lot of problems for us.
I bet.
And who knew until, right, we asked this guy, him. And oh, by the way, he was comfortable enough to answer, right? Because if I just hired you today, we're having a one-on-one, and I say, Joe, what do you want to be when you grow up? What do you want to be in 3 to 5 years? You're not going to really probably give me the real answer,
right?
Not the first day, right? That the level of trust has to be developed,
there. Yep.
Right? So,
and you bring up there's a couple of things I want to touch on, but trust in leadership. Can you talk to that a little bit? Because, I've worked in organizations where there was no trust of leadership, which made it very difficult for the team.
That's failed leadership.
Yep, that's failed leadership. And then I've worked in organizations and that have had trust and, successful leadership. And is that something... So I guess my question really is, in the engineering and manufacturing and
let's take those two words out of the discussion, because it doesn't matter.
I like that.
Doesn't matter.
And I
organizations. I'm going to answer your question before you even finish it, because organizations, it doesn't matter whether I'm a not-for-profit. I do business with not-for-profits, whether I'm a public entity, whether I'm a private entity, whether I'm big or small. At the end of the day, business, like life, is all about one thing: relationships, human relationships.
Absolutely.
Okay? So let's take that a step further. You cannot have any kind of meaningful human relationship without empathy. What is empathy? Empathy is not sympathy. It doesn't mean I agree with you.
Correct.
Empathy is the ability and the willingness to understand how somebody else feels, but also to want to understand and make the effort to understand why they feel that way. Where's that coming from? Once again, doesn't mean I agree. It just means I'm willing to make the effort of, hey, why is that upsetting? Where's that coming from? Why does that make you angry? Why does that make you upset in some way, shape, or form? Or why are you happy about that? What makes you tick? Why does that drive your motivation? Without that level of understanding, there is no real human connection, right? And you can't. Empathy and trust go hand in hand, right? And why do I say that? If I make the effort to understand how Joe is feeling, and I make the effort to understand where that's coming from, unless you're sociopathic or psychopathic, you're probably going to reciprocate in kind.
Correct.
Right? That is the definition of trust. We've just formed a relationship based on some level of trust. And the more that happens, the trust cycle, which is a real thing, just elevates, right? So, having described what that is and how it works, how do you have leadership successfully? How do you have organizations, which again, doesn't matter what we're doing, what we're making, or whatever, an organization is really about the interplay and the inner working of people. That's what gets the work done.
And I want to just say, for those who are going to tune into this podcast, you summed it up very nicely.
Thank you.
Because regardless of industry, and as I've gone around and talked to people in retail, in food services, you don't hear these words a lot. And you keyed right in on it. And
it's unfortunate, Joe, because why is it true what you just said is true? Here's why. People go and start businesses because they're good at something. Somebody understands food and understands cooking, and they start a restaurant and they have a passion for it. That's great. But they oftentimes have no clue about the stuff we're talking about. That's not their fault.
Correct.
They don't know what they don't know. And
right.
You could say the same thing about somebody that's brilliant technically, and they go, start up this business with this technical product or service. And they're very good at that. And they might even know how to sell it, but they have zero skills when it comes to leading an organization. That's why oftentimes entrepreneurs bring in professional people to CEO and run the company, because if they're smart, they realize, I can get this thing going, and I've got these great ideas and get it off the ground. But, man, all of a sudden now we got 30 or 40 people, and we're growing like a wildflower here, but I don't have any idea how to run this thing because I don't have those skills. That's, at the end of the day, that's why, not the only reason, but it's one of the reasons why a lot of small startups fail, because they almost collapse under the weight of their own success because the people that started it don't have the know-how to run it and continue to build it.
It's been my opinion, especially since I've started the podcast, and I want to know if you agree with it, because you really touched on it. Should people in these organizations say, I've talked to some hairdressers now that have worked for people. They started a hairdresser. They got a bunch of hairdressers working for them, but they don't know anything about leadership. They don't know anything about team building. All of a sudden, they've got 20 people in the shop, and it's kind of what you're talking about. You're an entrepreneur. You start a restaurant business.
Right.
Should you hire an expert to manage your team, or should you try to acquire those skills? And I think that's kind of like where your company comes in. And one of the services you provide.
I was going to say, give them my number
exactly.
Or my email address.
Yep.
And I love working with small and mid-sized companies. I work with some bigger ones too, but oftentimes the people I work with have the passion, and they have a great business idea, and they've had some success. But then they realize, I don't know what I don't know. And those are the ones I love working with, because they're hungry, right? They're willing to learn. They haven't developed this hubris that, I should know all the answers, right? Which is typically that's the main barrier I have with potential clients. It's not what I charge. I'm not the cheapest out there, but I'm certainly not the most expensive. But it comes down to, and I understand, I spent more of my life sitting on that side of the desk than this side. That there was certainly a time in my career when I thought the same thing. Like, why should I bring this guy in? Because that's an admission that I don't know how to do my job, when it's the farthest thing from the truth. Yeah, so to answer your question, do one or the other. Because if you're a small business person and you're seeing growth, and now all of a sudden you realize you're struggling with some of the management, the people issues, the leadership issues, either get some help, some coaching, some development for yourself and maybe for your team, or get an outside manager that has those abilities. One or the other, it's really your call, and I think the answer would really be situationally dependent. But it's, the investment up front, it's not a ton of money in the grand scheme of things. And, I do a lot of one-on-one coaching where I'll do a leadership development program with somebody for 8, 9, 12 weeks, whatever we decide on in the content. and we'll go through that. But then, I'll end up coaching sessions with them, say a couple times a month. The greatest compliment I've had to date is some of my clients call me their business therapist. I take that as high praise, right? Because they literally feel comfortable enough they'll talk to me about anything.
That's great.
And sometimes in the 30 minutes or hour we spend together, it's a vent session. And that's okay. There's value to that. Like, I wish I had that at different times of my career.
Yeah.
Right? And I'm sure from talking with you probably do too.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right? But then there are other times where they're struggling with something, hey, this group, this is going on, and I tell them up front, listen, if you're looking for the answer guy, call somebody else. That's not my job. It's way above my pay grade because I don't know what your answers are, right? But I'm going to help you get to your best answer. That's my job.
So one thing that we kind of we didn't really get into that, but in the conversation, when you're a boss, the whole point of the podcast is to eliminate bad bosses. So, but when you're a boss, one of the other things that people forget. So there's another side to this, is that, and you kind of touched on it, is that you're a human being too.
Yep.
So your boss is a human being too, and a lot of people forget that. So it tied into that, and I talked about that on one of the first podcasts I did. You may be going through personal situations yourself. I remember a specific situation. I mean, this is just an example where I had shoulder surgery. And somebody who worked for me said, you look miserable, you've been miserable, and what's wrong? And I said, oh my God, I said, it's nothing to do with any of my staff. I said, I had this shoulder surgery and it's not healing, and I'm in a lot of pain, and people are coming to work in pain. So I realized that not only a perception thing with myself,
right,
but also that other people, it kind of tunes you in to what other people may be going through, and a lot of people don't understand their boss. Is there another side, like when you're training people, how do you get that human aspect that, yes, you're going to have a boss who's possibly a sociopath or a narcissist. They're definitely out there, and they're definitely in management roles, and that's one thing I'd like to see reduced. But there also are bosses that have compassion, have empathy, but maybe going through their own personal struggles, or they may not be supported by their boss.
Yeah. So first off, words are really, really important to me. I don't use the word training. I use the word development, right? Because I can't possibly train somebody how to be a leader. There's way too many variables based on situations. What I'm helping them do is develop their skill sets, right? Their knowledge and their attitude, so that any situation that comes up, they'll be able to face it and handle it appropriately, right? So it sounds like minute, but to me, again, I'm kind of anal. I'll admit, maybe that's the engineer in me when it comes to language. Development is what I would really focus on. But what you're touching on is a really important issue. So I work a lot, not exclusively, but I work a lot with mid-managers. Okay, so these are people that would say be a department manager. They've got a staff that works for them. They've got a boss. They're in a unique position in the organization because they're kind of the front line, right? They make the whole thing go, and yet, right, they're connected to upper management because of their relationship with their boss. So one of the things that we talk about is, absolutely, you've got to get to know your boss. Just as important for you to develop that relationship we just talked about based on empathy and building that trust with your boss as it is for you to do it with your people. And it's important not just for you, it's important for your team that you form that good relationship, right? And there's lots, I won't get into all of it, but there's lots of little hints and tips we give people about, see them as a human being, right? Be straightforward with them. Don't overpromise. Don't just be a yes person, right? But also understand that there's an appropriate way to disagree, right? You don't want to make your boss look bad in front of his boss, right? There's just some basics. So we do give people, and we get into role playing, right? And some things like that where it's really a cool opportunity to practice some of this stuff. So, yeah, I mean, everybody has a boss. Look, I've got my own business. I don't have a boss internal, but my clients are my
Or your
boss,
boss,
right? I mean, I can't tell you, very seldom does a day go by, Joe, that I don't get a call or a text from one of my clients going, hey, can we move that date that we, or can we change the I just looked at my phone coming in here. And coaching call for tomorrow said, hey, can we move that to Thursday? Yeah, okay, no problem. But so, yeah, everybody's got a boss. It's just understanding. I think if you put it in the perspective of, again, human beings, right, and understanding that it's all about relationships, if I handle those relationships the right way with some empathy and trust and transparency, and, those can be catchphrases and overused words, but when they're really taken to heart and applied, that's gold.
Yeah, and I think that, as we start to get to wrap this up, those are the key.
Yeah.
Empathy and trust. No matter what industry. I mean, you touched on something that really,
Yeah.
no matter what industry, has nothing to do whether you're in food services or you're in engineering. You build on those things. You build it's all about relationships.
Correct.
It's
Correct.
all, and how many people understand that, or how many people, and I love, what you said, because it's not said enough. You come from it from your experience. So, from mine, it's training, but it's really not training. It really is development. And those differences, approaching somebody and saying this is a development opportunity,
Right.
as opposed to a training opportunity, night and day.
Well, and think about this, Joe, why those words matter. Here's another reason why training and development and the difference matters. Training insinuates that I know exactly the path you need to take to get you from A to B, right? Development says there's a best version of you out there somewhere, and I don't know what that is. I'm not God. That's above my pay grade. But there's a best version of you, and you know what? I'm going to help you develop the tools to figure out and go become that version. Which one would you rather be? Right? I'd rather be the latter and go through the development process. So, yeah, I do think that those differences matter, and I think it's a really important one.
So,
Because I can train you technical stuff,
correct.
right? And that's A's and B's and differential equations and whatever, all this other stuff. We can train you that. But development is really about becoming the best version of who you are and who you were put here to be. Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt.
No, that's great. So, talk a little bit about your company again. Let's put it out there, because I think you offer valuable service, and I have just become a student of this, Bad Bosses, as I go into fast food establishments or retail establishments, observing things. And, I think one of the stories I told the other day to a colleague of mine was, I went into and I had a Bad Boss, sweatshirt on. And, I went into a retail establishment, and there's somebody, addressing one of their employees in front of a store full of people that they did all this wrong. And I'm looking at the supervisor going, look at the shirt, like you don't, and they weren't really getting nonverbal communication from me. And I found it really hard to walk away. I wanted to go back and say, you should never address down an employee in front of a store full of people.
Or in front of anybody else.
In front of anybody else, but definitely not in front of your customers, because that's, so speak to that with your company. I mean, do you get those opportunities to go into different, retail and I want to put it out there, because I think you've got a great service here.
I appreciate that. Let me explain a little bit, about what I do and how I do it. So operations excellence is predominantly focused on leadership and organizational development. I do not cold walk into businesses and observe, that's not how I work.
Sure.
Typically I either through networking groups that I'm part of, through referrals, right? I do have my own podcast, which we'll have you on here not too far in the future. Other opportunities like that. But typically what happens, right, is a potential client I'll get connected with either through a referral, or they'll reach out to me or somebody I know through somebody else, whatever. And we'll get talking. And typically I don't even look at it like a sales conversation, right? Because the way I started off is, hey, tell me about your business or your organization. How are things going? You just really start teasing questions, and it's easy for me because, as I said earlier, I'm genuinely that guy that's inquisitive. I just like learning stuff. Like I'm working with companies now. It's like I don't know anything about glass glazing, and I'm finding all this stuff out. I'm like, that's really cool,
Right.
So that's kind of the geek engineer in me, right?
Yeah.
I like finding stuff out and learning. But if you ask questions and you really delve in and you're genuine, and we all got a BS meter, right? And people can tell if you're not genuine. And if you're genuinely interested, people love to talk about their business, because if you're talking to the owner or the people running it, they got a passion for it. This is their life. This is what they live. So of course they like talking about it.
Sure.
And it's pretty quickly I can tell, hey, they're getting results or they're not. Well, gee, how, tell me about what's gone on in the last year, and next thing you know, you come to find out, if I can help you, I can, right? And if I can't, I'll be the first. If you need an infusion of cash, or you're looking to sell and you need somebody that does this, if I can't help you, I know lots of people. I'll probably be able to turn you on to somebody that can. But if I can help you, all right, then I start the conversation of, hey, have you thought about this, this, and this? And I also understand, and I've come to believe through another friend of mine, I don't have any problem giving away, quote unquote, the secret. Like everything we've talked about today, that's the core, the basis of everything I do. And I just told anybody that wants to listen to this podcast, because the truth is, if it helps them, great.
Right.
But most people in organizations are going to struggle to make that operational without help. That's where I come in, right? I can actually help them with a leadership development program, all customized, right, based on what their needs are, what their situation is. If they need one-on-one coaching, if they need to develop a strategic plan, if they need to delve in deeper about other things with the organization, I can help them. If they need some process work, again, I'm an engineer. I spent the start of my career doing a lot of process work. But it's really people, process, and strategy. Those are the three things that I can help them with.
Awesome. And one more time for our audience, just you have a website, and you do a podcast.
Yep, operationsexcellence.com. That is Operations Excellence without the E in excellence, because somebody else already had that domain name, operationsexcellence.com. We are also on the website, coming out hopefully soon. I look over at Danny, our producer. We're going to come out with a workshop that my friend Joanne Yarrow and I put on about a month ago. We're going to be selling the video of that for a very reasonable price.
Awesome.
That workshop is entitled Keys to Successful Leadership. Danny's shaking his head yes, so I think I got that right.
Awesome.
Yeah, so that's coming out soon.
Well, thanks for coming on, and promise me you'll come back.
Anytime. My pleasure.
Love
Thank
to have
you, Joe.
you back in a little while, because I think we made some progress today for the public, and hopefully they'll listen.
Well, thanks.
All
Pleasure.
right.
Thank you,
Pleasure.
sir.
Thank you, sir.
All right.